And I look back on the presentation of the Congressional Gold Medal to His Holiness 14 years ago with joy and sadness. Joy because it was a glorious moment of recognition for a humble giant, and sadness because the hopes expressed on that occasion have not been fulfilled. The unfulfilled hopes include the Dalai Lama's wish, as he said that day, that China would become a more open, tolerant, and responsible country. But as we know, today China is more closed, more repressive, and less responsible because the dictatorship in China, like Ozymandias in Shelley's poem, will inevitably perish like all the other narcissistic despotisms in history. But what will not perish is the will, the identity, and the faith of the Tibetan people. The Han people themselves will eventually demand their rights, as they did in 1989 in Tiananmen Square. And when they are successful, reconciliation with Tibet along the lines of the middle way approach of His Holiness will become possible. We don't know when that time will come, but it will. And until then, may the inspiration of His Holiness and the prayers and the moral solidarity of all mankind give the Tibetan people the strength to carry on.
Awarding him the Congressional Gold Medal was a gesture of strong support and solidarity on behalf of the United States. The Congressional Gold Medal is reserved for the most heroic, courageous, and outstanding individuals and is the highest award that may be bestowed by the legislative branch of the U.S. government, as well as the nation's highest civilian honor. In a few weeks, we will mark the 14th anniversary of that auspicious occasion, but unfortunately, the situation in Tibet and of His Holiness remains unchanged. It was my honor to become the first Hispanic woman elected to Congress and to bring awareness among my colleagues to promote legislation to help the people of Cuba who yearn for freedom and democracy. Similarly, I look forward to a day when the first Tibetan American is elected to Congress and can bring the heartfelt insight and passion that comes from personal experience.
I was so fortunate to be in the Capitol Rotunda that day when he received the gold medal from President Bush and Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader McConnell. It was such a beautiful ceremony and one filled with such great affection and an abiding spirit of joy. Whether it's his wisdom or his compassion, his pure humanity, and his loving kindness for all sentient beings, all of these things, it is an amazing experience to be around His Holiness, to see what he does in a room full of people and how people just light up when he comes in.
In 1991, we held a packed house session under the beautiful Capitol Rotunda. Both the House and Senate leadership, both parties, spoke at that event, as did the Dalai Lama and many of his representatives. I will tell you, the atmosphere was almost carnival-like, and it was electrifying. And I think that moment really consolidated bipartisan support for the Tibetan movement. And equally so, President Herbert Walker Bush, who we all may remember was also the head of the CIA at one point and a U.S. ambassador to China, also took umbrage to the Chinese strong-arm tactics. And around that same time of the Capitol Rotunda speech, President Bush was basically the first president to meet officially with the Dalai Lama as the leader of the Tibetan government in exile in a very public way, which also further galvanized U.S. support for the Tibetan people. So I guess a lesson here is bullying doesn't work, and basically this event that happened 30 years ago, I'm glad we were able to commemorate that today, basically led to a great deal of activity within the US Congress, over the years that have ensued from that event in the Capitol Rotunda. We've had major legislation that's passed that recognizes Tibet as being invaded by the Chinese government, and also basically recognizing and documenting the human rights abuse that has occurred in Tibet, and offered support for the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan government's exile's efforts to attain a negotiated peaceful settlement with the Chinese government over the future of Tibet.